Josh, we're old enough now where we've seen the passing of our grandparents, and we're also seeing the aging of our parents.
Right.
I have not yet experienced becoming a grandparent, and that's probably still some years off.
You hope so, anyway.
Well, you would hope
the
so.
more, the better.
What we're talking about today is the evolving relationship of parents and children, and it's something that you don't understand fully until you've kind of walked through the gate, and Josh and I are kind of midway through that journey.
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird thing because I kind of equated this when I was talking to Brian, like the student is becoming the master type thing, where like my parents are asking me questions that like they would have answered themselves a while ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, just do this, and they actually listen to me, which is a kind of a odd thing to be in.
So we're going to riff on this a little bit. Please launch out onto the loop with us today as we discuss the evolving relationship of parents and children today on Curiosity Continuum.
Hey everybody, this is Josh.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to Curiosity Continuum. We are a podcast and movement started by two lifelong friends whose mission is to guide you through a changing world by helping you level up your contextual awareness. We'll also help you sharpen your collaboration and problem-solving skills. Our conversations explore, examine, and reframe common practical topics that help you learn something new and apply what you already know in a new way.
If you find these conversations helpful, please hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app and rate us and leave a review so others can join the community. And as always, you can find us on curiositycontinuum.com and on our social media accounts. Thanks for tuning in, and let's start the conversation.
All right, Brian. So I was bringing up this conversation. You said, let's record it because that's what we do. You know, we're like, yeah,
yes,
boom, let's record that. We were actually talking about this because both sets of our parents are aging, of course, because everyone's getting older. No one's getting younger. But it's become, I think, evident to even our parents and us that we want to be closer together. We want to be, instead of like the separation that we tried to have when we were younger, now we want to be closer together and we want to be within an area to help each other out. Right, Brian?
Yeah, and I've noticed that even like my mom is moving back closer to me for some of those relationship ties that we have. You know, I'm a major draw in my mother's life and my stepdad's life.
You should be. Yeah.
Hopefully. Like if you said I'm the major repellent, and you know that may be somebody's story. Actually, it's like, you know, I want nothing to do with them.
And I mean that does happen, and it's kind of sad. In that
it is sad.
Yeah.
In our dynamic, what we have is a changing of the guard. What's interesting to me is that, as you know, we're going through like the real estate buying process here. For where I live, the real estate market is hot, like super hot.
Same here.
So I have a friend who I've done multiple real estate stuff with. He's a long trusted friend. His name is David Fountain, and he's in the Middle Tennessee area. So if you are relocating to the area, please make sure you look him up, and he will take great care of you. David was helping me kind of work through the requirements now that my parents are, or, you know, later on in years. There is no like, and then I'm going to stack my 401k this much fuller, you know?
Right.
It's like they are where they are and they're doing fine, but yet they still have other considerations, and they don't have the same type of considerations that they did even 10 years ago when they're buying a home. They're in their 70s now. They're very clear that like this will probably be our last move. That's a strange thought to think about. To go, this is, you know, I'm thinking about Lord of the Rings right now, where Treebeard goes, the last march of the end.
Yeah.
It's not that dramatic, probably, but
No.
you know, it's like, but you really stop and think, go, you know, this actually could be the last place that mom and dad actually buy, and that's a strange thought. I actually wonder too if this is really more like a continental U.S. issue, because I have a friend in Hawaii, and because of real estate, it's constrained by price and by physical space. Like you just can't sprawl out like you would like in Montana or something like that. So you have a lot of multi-generational homes. Kind of where Josh and I sit in the equation is that, you know, we left our mom and dad physically as far as like moving out of the home and then moving far away from our parents to start our own life together with our spouses.
Exactly.
To see this cycle now come in where Josh said in the intro, where parents are asking questions. Now, what's interesting is that as you kind of see that change, you almost see the writing on the wall, not in a bad way necessarily, but you go, like I'll hit that point sometime in my life. I think as you get out of like your early years and even out of like your 20s, you go like, oh, I'm in a different phase of my life.
Yes.
And I didn't understand that phase of life until I actually hit it.
Yeah, and I think that is something that you can't prepare for. It's something that you can learn about. People can tell you about, and you'll be like, I don't believe you. It's all those things that people told you when you were getting older that was going to happen. Look, when you hit 30, you're going to have to take antacids every night. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. You just never believed them because you're like, nope, that's not going to happen. Not me. I'm different. And then you hit 30 and you're like buying Tums in bulk. It's just the way it works. It's the cycle of life. It is the cycle of life. And I find this I love it, but I also find it kind of scary in a way because this is the mortal coil. This is like you realizing that yourself at some point is going to get to this point. Mm-hmm. And then, there's only so far you go. You're like, okay, well, I'm not dying yet, but it is about death. It is about the finality of it. And it's like, It's not like my parents are anywhere close to death, or Brian's mom's anywhere closer to death, or dad is anywhere closer to death. But it is that idea that we have to wrap our heads around as human beings, that we're only here for this time. And so I think that we need to realize what's important and start planning for just being human.
Yeah, nobody can buy their time back. Like Cher could turn back time if she could find a way.
Yeah, lots of money later, she's still old.
She's still old, and she never could turn back the clock of time.
Right.
We're faced with that. We're going like, okay, so we are now looking at each subsequent decade of our life to go, okay, so now here I am. It's like, where am I? You could be healthier. You could be richer. You could be poorer. You could be further on in your career. You could maybe have had a divorce. You may have gotten married. You may have had children. There's lots of other things that
death
are
close to the family or whatever,
Yeah. My dad passed when I was 28 years old. So when I say dad on this podcast, I'm referring to my stepdad, who has been married to my mother for a few years now, and they've been happily married. But that dynamic is different. My dad left my life before I hit 30. Now, what's interesting is that my wife's dad, his dad didn't die until he was in his 70s. Like, this guy was in his mid-90s.
Sure.
Until he passed away. So he didn't know a life at all without either parent until his 70s. It's a very different dynamic, and you realize, I think sometimes the fragility of life, and you understand too that I think your dependence on one another, you could easily separate yourselves and not do that. But I think that there's a reason why people tune into the needs of their parents. If they have a good relationship, they're like, you don't necessarily want, to be living on top of one another.
Right.
But you want to make sure that their needs are cared for.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not only a part of getting older, but I think it's a part of just being a good human being. You want to make sure that those people who cared for you when you were younger and didn't really know better and did all sorts of crap that you probably would take back half of that if you could today, but maybe not. But you know what I mean? Like you want to make sure that they're okay. And I think that's a good thing. It's kind of like that caring thing. And I think a lot of people are missing that kind of context on it today.
That's an interesting thing to kind of riff on a little bit because, I have friends that are international. And when I start to think about our experience here in the United States, really, it's been about carving your own way and going out and doing things.
It's
you have a lot of other...
Yeah, it's about me. It's the me thing.
Right. And myself.
Right.
When you start talking about even people who live maybe a different life, it's about us. And those bonds of family are closer and closer knit and a little bit more present physically. And look, there's a lot of dynamics at play. Family gatherings are not easy. No family, even in a functional family, whatever you want to call functional, it's like
every family screwed up. I want to say that, and that's true. Every family has the idiosyncrasies, has the things that happen because people are people. And that's just what happens,
And you don't get the perspective on that until you're an adult.
Right.
After you've grown up, And you're like, you mean so and so was an alcoholic? It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but they were always so happy, or they were always so whatever.
Because they were drunk.
Right. And you never knew. You never knew
Right.
that stuff until it's like, oh my gosh, like I never knew. Or it's like the situation where like going like, why did this person divorce? Like I thought they were happy. Like no, they've been miserable for years. It's like,
Right. But it was people are also comfortable in misery, the familiar. And so that's a whole nother podcast, I think. But that
whole other
is
podcast.
kind of what it is too. And I think if you can kind of break out of that, it's good.
it's very good. You know, I had a coworker once say to me, he loved Halloween more than like Christmas or Thanksgiving.
Sure.
You know, and I've like my children like start talking to me about Halloween. I think maybe in like March. Like,
Sure.
what do you want to be for Halloween this year, Dad? I say honestly, I have literally not thought a single thought about Halloween until you brought this topic up. You know, I've always loved Thanksgiving and Christmas, but when this person said why, I was like, this makes sense. Now there's probably another podcast in this too. He said that Halloween is the holiday where you can be around the people you actually want to be around.
It's true.
He
Thanksgiving
said,
is
and
the same way.
Thanksgiving
Yeah.
and Christmas,
Yeah.
Thanksgiving and Christmas is the one like you have to be around family, and you know there's obligations. You could talk about how those obligations should or should not work.
Right.
But it's really interesting. If it's just people getting together because they want to get together, that's one thing. When you get family together, it's complicated.
Yes.
There's always that black sheep or 2 or 5 in your family, and if you don't think that there's a black sheep in the family, it's you.
You are that person. Yeah.
You are that person.
Like I have
Everybody-
been affectionately referred to at Christmas time as the uncle that drinks beer.
There he is over there.
Yeah. Oh, he's drinking some beer over there. Go over there and talk to him. You know. It's like,
With those things though, you come to realize too how much your parents did.
right.
And you know what? Like I say this in jest and loving care. It's like they didn't know what they were doing just as much as you don't know
No.
what you're doing. We're trying to raise your children if you're doing it. It's
Exactly.
like you go through cycles, and the reason why human beings have these same cycles and everything is because it's a cycle of life. It's not like your life is so much different than the rest of the human race where you can't talk about those things.
Right. And I think it is important to talk about this. And that's why I wanted to riff on this idea a little bit of just kind of cycling back around to where, you know, I affectionately said, well, you know, the student has become the master, where like now we have all the answers and I'm going to hold them from you, old man, and I'm never going to tell you. But that's what it is about, I think. It's about the passing of the torch. It's about your parents and the older people in your life realizing that they were just like you when they were your age. They didn't know anything, but it was just thrust upon them anyway.
And they figured it out.
And they figured it out. And I think people underestimate themselves that they can do this. It's not as scary as you think. But it doesn't also mean you should crave it. You should want to have your parents around and those more elder than you around for longer because they have important life lessons to teach us. We should be listening to those more.
Yeah.
I always hung around old people, and I know that I got a lot of flack in my family group for that because it's like, why do you hang around those old people? I'm like, if you notice how interesting these people are, it's like
So interesting.
You know?
It really is.
yeah,
It's like
and
they have
they've
nothing
done
to prove
stuff,
anymore.
and and like when they get to that certain age, they'll tell you everything. They'll tell you they took a grenade and ran into a Nazi camp or whatever, and you're like, wow, tell me more
Yeah.
about that story.
Yeah, and then they don't because it's like it was probably
It never
traumatic for
happened.
them. Exactly. But
Yeah.
Josh, we live in a very youth-centric culture,
Sure.
and I'll tell you what. Sometimes it's not, especially in the fast-paced world. Takes effort, concerted, actual effort, to listen to somebody older than you.
Yes.
Because they're not running at the same speed. Now, see, that's an interesting thing because, like, we're all running our race, and if we take, we could do all the cliche metaphors of like life is a journey and it's a race and it's a marathon, not a sprint, and all these other kinds of things. We're all running a different place, and when we run into those or intersect with those people, they're in a different part of the race. Sometimes you have to slow your roll, or you have to
Yeah.
change your pace to be able to do it. Now, if you're older, sometimes you have to pick up your pace because there's like grandchildren running around. It's like, hey, you need to, pick up the energy a little bit. And that is. But there's a natural kind of aligning. It's going to sound like real ooky spooky, but if you like align your energies, like you can have a moment where you actually learn. There's this group of veterans, and before the world kind of locked down and everything like that, there's a group of veterans that they met every Friday. They were eating themselves some pizza at Costco. There's some guys that just popped in and said, these guys have the most interesting stories that you've ever heard in your life.
Sure.
Just because they've lived so much life. And there was like none of them that were under 70 years old. And just have a chance to listen to them and talk to them, even if it's not your parent, it's like somebody who is an older generation than you. There's so much you can learn. And they've had such a rich life, probably just by the fact of the number of years on the earth.
Right. And it's not to mean that, like, they're rich or poor, like in money wise, but just their experiences make them worthwhile to listen to.
Yes. By listening to them also, you're enriching their life. It's a two-way street.
Right.
To be able to share that information in that human relationship.
Right. I think that's probably a great place to put a comma on, Brian.
I believe so. Until next time, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
For Curiosity Continuum.